We will start now the first release session of this conference. First, we will have norm.green from GemStone that will show us the new update of GemStone. And then after, we will have a robotic presentation, live robotic programming. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Steph. Buongiorno. That cafe latte and Chianti are the only Italian I know, so this talk will be in English. So GemTalk, this is what I'll cover today. We're now 2 years into our new company life. I'll go through the versions that we're working on and our licensing options, and I'll take questions at the end. So on May 1st, we turned 2 years old, leaving VMware. And we're very happy about that, doing well. We've had 6 new product releases in the past year. We redesigned our website, we've hit our financial goals, and we haven't lost any staff. So we're calling that a success. On the GemStone 64 product, our latest release actually came out just last week, July 8th, that's 3.2.7. And our next major release, which we do about once a year, is scheduled for this September. So I'll be going through some of the new features in that release. The first thing we did is we're constantly trying to get faster Smallalk VM performance, and we spent quite a bit of time on this. The main things we did is optimize the native code generator for branch prediction, mostly on the Intel 64 platform. Where you'll see this is mostly faster integer math, small integer calculations and things like that are faster. About 25% overall. Of course, your mileage will vary. Also in 3.3, we improved the transaction log restore speed. It's about 30% faster. This comes into play when you're running a hot standby system or doing the restore from backup with applying transaction logs to the repository. So we've done some multi-threading and some things in here to make this faster. We've added Smalltalk access to the Unix syslog. This was a customer request. Some people like to add things to the Unix log of the system. And we added a class called GSsyslog that supports doing this now. It takes ASCII string, text strings, and puts it in the Unix log so you can see it along with the other messages coming from Unix. We added a new immediate class in 3.3 called small fraction. And this is a special or immediate class, which means the value is contained in the object ID, so it never requires any I/O or disk access. It's got a finite range, of course. The numerator and denominator range is here specified, but it's much faster than a fraction object, which is what we were using in the past for these ranges. And the fraction objects will self-represent as a small fraction starting in 3.3 when you send them messages, assuming they fit in the range. Something else that we've heard a lot from our customers is the GS file class, which is a class for accessing files on the file system, has been slow. So we spent quite a bit of time in 3.3 trying to make that faster. And the way we did that is we made certain key methods primitive calls in 3.3, like next, put, peek, things like that. So if you're using GS file in the past and found it was too slow, you should try again in 3.3. We hope it will be much better in this release. We also added support for UTF-8. Getting a lot more requests for that lately. We also added something called LZ4 data compression. It's a relatively new project. It started on a Google code, and it's about 10 times faster than zlib or gzip for doing data compression. It doesn't quite compress as well. It's about 75–80% compression ratio to gzip, but the performance is much faster and noticeably faster. So we've converted most of our internal compression going across networks and so on like that to LZ4 3.3. So where we have implemented LZ4 and 3.3, it's not everywhere yet, but the remote VM to page server, the GCI to the VM to the gem, access to remote shared page caches, and Stone hot by standby servers where you're sending incremental transaction updates to a hot standby server. This is also another customer request. We've added encryption as an option between a remote VM or remote gem to its page server on the main repository machine. So this allows you to have encryption now all the way from the client or Smallalk image or C process, whatever it is, all the way back to the repository end to end. This, before 3.3 you couldn't encrypt all the way, but now you can. We have some customers that are implementing GemStone out on the cloud and cloud services and so on, and for sensitive data they want encryption everywhere. There's a new parameter in 3.3 which is aggressive commit record disposal. Commit record is you can think of as a view in GemStone encapsulated. And there could be cases where when the oldest transaction aborts, you may have several hundred or thousand transactions still backed up. And if you have to do this one at a time, it can take a long time, and the database can grow quite large. So this makes the disposal of old views in GemStone more aggressive. Again, it comes from a customer request in this new one 3.3. We also support starting the statistics monitor or stat monitor now automatically in 3.3. There are config call options to do this where you can pass arguments to what will start the stat monitor process. And these include wildcards that are taken from the string ftime C call. So you can specify a month, an hour, a day, a second, whatever you want as wildcards in the file name. We've also multi-threaded one of the last commands that wasn't multi-threaded for repository maintenance in GemStone called page audit, which does a page level audit of the repository. That gives you a performance of about 20 times faster than in 3.2 where it was still single threaded. We've added an object canonicalization framework in 3.3. We did this with a customer as kind of a joint project, but we find there's a lot of instances in GemStone databases where you have the same string value, say, that appears perhaps thousands of times. And that's really wasteful. When you don't want to do that, it drives up the object count, it takes space in the repository, and so on. And there was really no good public way to canonicalize things like that up until now. So now there's a framework of classes that support this: canonical object manager, canonical object policy, etc. Where if you have objects where you know there are a lot of duplicates in value, string is one, date could be another, things like that, you can try to canonicalize them and get your object count down inside the database. We've added some more features to our LDAP implementation. We use LDAP as a mechanism for logging into GemStone, where you can specify an LDAP server to do the authentication of the user credentials. In the past, you had to allow anonymous binds in order to resolve a distinguished name or DN when you're doing the login. And it turns out there are some LDAP installations where there are no anonymous accesses allowed whatsoever. These are mostly corporate environments. So we added a way so that you could do an LDAP login without requiring anonymous binds from the LDAP server. We changed the architecture in 3.3 of our page server. Previously, before 3.3, there was one page server process, Unix process, per remote VM or remote gem. So it was a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you had 3,000 VMs, and we have customers that actually want more than that, you had 3,000 page server processes. And that can lead to problems with page table memory, especially on Linux, where Linux, the Linux kernel doesn't necessarily know that those are all duplicate processes looking at the same memory. And it can get quite expensive in terms of overhead memory that the server consumes. In 3.3, we've multi-threaded the page server so that you get down to one page server per remote VM host. And that's a little hard to explain, so we have a picture here. This is the way it was in 3.2, where you can see your remote VMs here, and over on the main repository server, you have one process per VM. In 3.3, we just start one page server process, and we start as many threads as we need in that page server process to service the remote VMs on that host. So this, again, overall, we get an overall saving here in system memory overhead and the page table space on Linux to do this. And for a few hundred of these, it doesn't make much difference, but for the few thousand, it really adds up to gigabytes of memory that you're saving. Also in 3.3, we've improved the cache warming for remote caches, and this kind of requires a picture again too. If you have, say, a remote server over here on the left, where you've got remote VMs, and you're using what we call a mid-level cache, which is like a cache on that server that all the other caches run off of. If you're going to warm this cache, mean preload it, you don't want to pull the pages over to the leaf caches here 1 through 3, one at a time over the slow network link. Okay, because that's just hammering on a link that is probably very slow and constricted. What you'd like to be able to do is bring all the pages over to the mid cache, one time only across the slow WAN here, and then warm the leaf caches off of that mid cache. Before 3.3, you couldn't do this, and we've added the ability to do this because we have some customers that operate in this very architecture. We also added something to empty out the shared page cache, which is the piece of shared memory that all the VMs share on a given host. This was a customer request. I'm not really sure why they wanted this, but you can now run this private method, and it tries to remove all the pages from the cache that are not locked and start off with an empty cache again. Since it's an underscore method, the QA guys don't test this extensively, so it's kind of use at your own risk, but it's believed to work. Something else we've added is, and this is long overdue, Smallalk access to the garbage collection configurations for any user. In the old mechanism, you had to log in as GC user and then make changes to a dictionary in that user's symbol list. And we've now made it that with the right permissions, you can change the GC setting from any user from any login without going through the extra steps. I talked about this last year and it got some interest, so I thought I'd repeat it. One of our guys has been working on an experimental gem builder for Android, where you can actually log into a GemStone system from an Android phone, and it uses Java and SSL. And that's still ongoing. We've done some updates with that. It's not a product yet, but there isn't a download for it. I'll show you here in a minute. But here's your GemStone login screen on an Android phone. You can put in the IP address of the machine, some credentials, and then you can log in and execute arbitrary Smalltalk from the Android phone. Don't know if this is practical for anything, but it's cool, we thought. And like I said, we had a couple of people last year that came up and wanted to download this and play with it, so we've kind of kept it alive. This is where you can get it. These slides will be available after the conference, but you can FTP it from here. And the guy working on this, his name's Bill Erickson, and you can email him directly if you want to try it or have issues with it. We've also done a lot of work on VSD, which stands for Visual Static Display. That's the tool that we ship that looks at GemStone database statistics as well as host statistics in a graph form. This tool is comprised of a number of open source packages. A lot of them went obsolete about 10 years ago. So it's been a bit of a challenge keeping this going. It's written in TCL/TK, which is not obsolete actually, but it's been changed radically since the version we built is on 8.4 to 8.6. There's a package called VLT that we had to replace with a new package that does kind of the same thing. because BLT hadn't been updated since '03. And we added a few features to this that I'll go through. One of our customers runs about 10 different instances of this tool with graphs open at the same time, and they were having trouble deciding which graph belonged to which database, which set of windows were together. So they said it'd be really cool if we could just set a background for each one so that the background color would show you which ones belong together. So we added that, and we also added the ability to copy a point to the clipboard. Because a lot of times when you're looking at graphs like this, you want to grab like the peak value off the graph here and say put that in Excel or some spreadsheet or something. So we put a right click and you click on the point now and you do a copy Y value to the clipboard and paste it. Just to review the platforms we run on the object server database, we're on Linux, Apple, Oracle Solaris for both Spark and Intel, and IBM EIX. On the client side, we support Syncom VisualWorks. Currently only 7 VisualWorks, 7, 9, 7, 10, but we are working on VisualWorks 8 support. It's going to be a little while though. And VA Smallalk 8.6 and 8.5.2 on Windows. So what are we looking at in 3.4? Well, it's very early days yet, so we haven't finalized this certainly, but we've started thinking about it since we haven't shipped 3.3 yet. We're going to add more LZ4 support, assuming the rollout of that goes well, into things like Stat Monitor BSD, Copy DBF, GS file. There's currently support for gzip and GS file, so it makes sense to add LZ4 there as well if you want to write to LZ4 compressed files. Backup and restore is another place that would be really handy to have that. We're going to multi-thread more page servers. There are certain configurations that the page server runs in now that are not yet multi-threaded. We did the first big one, as I went through a few slides back, but there's more to do there. Improved commit performance. There's some places where we can eliminate some memcopy calls to improve the overall maximum transaction rate of GemStone. And of course, your suggestions here. We love hearing from customers what they'd like to see, what would be helpful, what works, what doesn't work. So by all means, let us know. One thing that came up last year that we thought about but haven't implemented yet is more login options to GemStone. Right now we have 3 really. We have the classic GemStone user ID and password, where the password is stored inside the database in encrypted form. We have LDAP login, and we have kind of a Unix login where you can use Unix credentials with PAM or whatever you have on the Unix side to authenticate a user ID password. The question is what to add from here. And there's several possibilities. This list kind of came from what Postgres supports, and we're not sure we need to support all or any of these at this point. But again, we'd like to hear from you if you have opinions on this. There's GSS API with Kerberos, SSL certificate, where you could do something like an SSH passwordless login if the certificate was there. That might be an option. Radius, which I think is mostly a Windows thing, or perhaps it's the next one. I can't remember the details of these. SSPI. So there's a number of alternative login options we could support in GemStone, and we're not really sure which of these to pick and which ones to do first. So if you have opinions on that and things that would be useful, we'd love to hear about it. On the Gem Builder for Smalltalk side, GBS 8 is what the GBS team is working on right now. Hope to ship that in August. That'll support the latest VW implementation, 7.9, 7.10, as well as support for the new GemStone 64 3.3 server that's coming out in September. Bug fixes. There's a beta available now upon request if you want to get your hands on it. VisualWorks 8 support is coming probably around the year end with GBS 9. That's taking longer than it usually does. It turns out there's some pretty low-level things changed in VW between 7 and 8 that we're having to deal with, so it's going to take some time to get that going. And GBS for VA Smalltalk. We're going to do a release probably in September timeframe again, 5.4.3. And then we're hoping to do an integrated release release of GBS, GBS 10, probably by about 2017, where we integrate the source code into one main source code line between our VA and our VW support, which is a major job. But it's aggressive, but we're going to try and do it because it's going to save us a lot of work if we can pull it off. Coming to the end here, our licensing models, just to review, we changed this about a year ago, and I think the reception's been pretty much positive as far as the free licenses go. But we have perpetual licenses, you can buy it once, own it forever. We have subscription licenses, you can pay every year and cancel any time. And then we have our VAR program, which is for value-added resellers that build applications on top of GemStone. The GemStone Community Edition, which they renamed from the Web Edition, this was changed about a year ago, and this is the features that we support here for the various editions of the Community Edition. We used to support unlimited database size for some of these editions, but we found a few people were kind of using that more than they were intended to as far as repository scale goes, because what we used to do was limit the cache size to be a certain size. If you said you could have as much data on disk as you want. We found certain people were running tens of gigabytes of database, just putting it on SSD drives and running with a very small cache, which was really not what this was designed for. So we had to rein this in a little bit. But you could still get quite a bit for free to start up on GemStone. And that's my last slide. Are there questions? Yes?
So since you're more than a year independent now, can you tell us about the business? How's business going?
Sure. The question was, since we've been independent now for actually 2 years, how's business? Business is good. We've kept all of our customers. We've got a few new customers. We've met our financial goals. We haven't lost any staff. So we're doing what we do. Things are going well. Yeah.
Question about the current status, vision about FARO support.
Current status and vision about FARO support. That is really Dale's department, and Dale did not come this time. Dale Henricks, a lot of you know him. So I can't speak to that because I didn't get an update from Dale before I leave. But I can certainly find out for you kind of where we are with that. There's no plans right now to formally support FARO or GemBuilder for FARO right now, although that has been discussed. We need a certain amount of business case, of course, to go and do that, where it would have to pay for itself, because that's kind of how we operate. But it's a question that we have asked ourselves before, and we'll probably continue to this step. Yeah, that's correct. You can use GemStone with FARO now, although there's not a GemBuilder for it. But I mean, there's a lot of people doing that. So, yeah.
On that free edition, does it include GBS for VisualWorks or VA?
No, the free edition does not include GBS. That's one way that we kind of protect our corporate customers that have paid us a lot of money for GBS support and so on. Now, we are open to adding that on if you want to do the free edition and have a GBS where you pay for GBS, perhaps at a small scale. We don't have that on the matrix, but we're very open to discuss that if that's a configuration that you need. Yeah?
You mentioned you can export the GS file.
Yes.
Is that file contents or file names?
Both. Thank you very much.